Hi, and welcome back to That's Entertainment, the weekly entertainment show where we look at all the interesting news from last week this week. The lack of transparency regarding streaming platforms' audience data is something we're well aware of here at Groovy. The Hollywood Reporter's recent analysis of the situation summarizes our thoughts perfectly. Streaming platforms gather reams of data about their users, whether their certain titles drive subscriptions, how long people watch a show or movie for, how many people finish that show once they've started, and things like cost per user, average revenue per user, and these other metrics that are very, very important for establishing whether or not you have a success or not. All of these figures are kept in-house, and in most cases, streamers don't even share basic viewing data publicly. Platforms like HBO Max, Netflix, Apple TV, Amazon Prime, and Hulu continue to keep a vice-like grip on their data, and nearly a decade into the streaming area, the lack of transparency is making it nearly impossible for deal makers and even viewers to define what is a hit and what is a bomb. In most cases, streamers don't even share basic viewing data publicly. There's no industry-wide currency for viewership of data on SVOD platforms in the way that Nielsen ratings have served the traditional TV business for decades, or box office figures have measured the performance of featured films. Well, we're going to need new forms of measurement. Nielsen, if you're not aware, is what the TV industry uses for ratings, but again, it only measures tune-in, share of market versus other titles that show might be competing against, and it's been heavily criticized by many as being a very inaccurate way of measuring actual real performance. Theaters have number of tickets sold as part of the metrics that the theatrical teams work with at the various major movie studios. And now we have a much richer data set, but we still have no real clear definition on what's to be measured, how it's to be measured. And I think this is going to be one of the biggest conundrums coming up over the next 4 or 5 years. Netflix have made a huge change to the status quo recently with the publication of their weekly Netflix Top 10 charts and webpage. As Netflix Pablo Perez de Ros, VP of Content Strategy, revealed on the 16th of November, the charts will draw on hours viewed from Monday to Sunday the previous week for both original and licensed titles, broken down as follows: Global Top 10 list of films in English, Global Top 10 list of TV shows, films and TV shows in non-English formats, as well as rankings for over 90 countries. In a post on the Netflix blog, De Rosso explained, figuring out how best to measure success in streaming is hard. There's no one perfect metric. Traditional measures like box office or share of audience, which was designed to help advertisers understand success on linear TV, aren't relevant to most streamers, including Netflix. Total viewing hours mirror the way third parties measure popularity and encompass a rewatch, and can be consistently measured across different companies. This is an important step forward for Netflix, the creators we work with, and our members. People want to understand what success means in the streaming world, and these lists offer the clearest answer to that question in our industry. The decision received initial positive coverage in the trade press, and respected media and technology analyst Richard Greenfield of Lightshed Partners went even further. According to Next TV, Greenfield offered one highly plausible reason why the streamers decided to publish such data. By publishing its actual viewership data, Netflix is essentially creating a new weapon to shift talent and projects in its direction away from its peers. He also dug into the first week's hours viewed numbers to expand upon the success of Netflix's recent hit movie Red Notice. Assuming the vast majority watched the entire 2-hour movie, it was seen by 76 million household subscribers in just 3 days. Assuming about 2 to 3 people per Netflix household watched the film together and not assuming repeat viewing, it implies that Red Notice was viewed by well over 150 million people in its just first 3 days of release, and potentially over 200 million people. But not everyone has been so positive about this latest development from Netflix, with Variety declaring Netflix's expanded viewing data move is mainly a flex. It's underscoring the fact that it operates the biggest subscription video service on the planet. The streamer is given notice to the industry, customers, and Wall Street that it has an engine capable of producing a surprise hit like Squid Games, which Netflix says was viewed an astronomical 1.65 billion hours over its first 28 days of release. These aren't ratings, as the TV industry has grown to love and hate them. Ratings are a measure of all viewing across a set of programs in a given time period, including the poorest performing shows. At the end of the day, Netflix is not going to reveal hard data of which of its originals has been stinkers. TV ratings also provide an estimated breakdown of an audience's demographic composition, which is a level of detail Netflix isn't sharing. There's no business reason to do so. The streaming giant doesn't sell ads, so it doesn't need to prove to anyone who is viewing what and for how long. Television Business International also came up with some interesting critical observations about the potential analysis of these new data sets. Opting to discontinue the metric it has used for nearly 2 years means that it will be impossible to gauge the success of Netflix future titles compared to its older titles. Both metrics also by design exclude viewing of old third-party series and films, which account for a lot of the viewing time spent on the platform. That would make sense if that was Netflix's move, because those blockbuster shows like Modern Families and Friends account for a lot of the subscription renewals that go on with the Netflix environment. And I would understand probably why they want to keep those numbers hidden on those shows, because it keeps the renegotiation of those contracts in that gray area where it's all in Netflix's favor. As such, it's hard to argue that Netflix has become more transparent. Instead, it is slightly more transparent, but in a different way. The Entertainment Strategy Guide was even more critical of Netflix's decision to update the same 40 data points each week. Maybe Netflix thought they would get an advantage by finally releasing their data. Well, they aren't giving away all their data. In fact, they're giving away hardly any of it. They're giving away the top slice of the top slice of the top slice of the top of the iceberg. Their millions of customers generate billions of data points across thousands of shows every day across their platform. 40 data points doesn't give that much away. Well, I would agree with that analysis. Yeah, there's a depth of things that you can really penetrate into once you start looking at what you're measuring. But again, people get lost in the data. There are actually, when you really look at things like cinema and TV viewing times, certain patterns of behavior that you can target. So like everything, it's a Pareto distribution. There are, 20% of the things that you're tracking are responsible for 80% of the outcomes, would be my approach to this. And I think we're still in the process of defining what that is for VOD, but I'm sure Netflix knows what that is too. Let me finish the Entertainment Strategy Guide's list of reasons why Netflix may have taken the decision to publish their top 10 weekly chart. Talent wants information on what is doing well. For some talent, they had begun releasing specific performance reports, but then these were getting leaked to the press, and this provides a much more coherent and talent-friendly process. This data point is designed to emphasize the success of Netflix originals over licensed content, which helps Netflix sell a narrative to Wall Street. Netflix is also changing the narrative from one subscriber growth to hours viewed, which will help Netflix as their subscriber growth ultimately slows. It's good PR to be first, which Netflix is here again. The numbers will be big, and that will help Netflix continue to drive the narrative that they are clearly the dominant streamer, which, let's face it, they are. And customers will like it. And like the top 10 lists, it will drive discovery of currently popular shows. Maybe Squid Game isn't as popular without top 10 lists driving its awareness. If you're skeptical about Netflix's sudden release of numbers, please feel free to drop your thoughts into the comments section below. We always appreciate that feedback, and we'll probably circle back on this one. Yes, measurement is incredibly important in the VOD space, but I imagine, agents and talent scouts are beginning to wring their hands together, probably out of a combination of frustration and the sight of opportunity here, because everyone's been negotiating in a very darkened room about how their content is performed, where they sit as a star, how much of things worth, that kind of stuff. So the first crack in the door has begun to open, and I think organizations and government bodies like the European Union and Creative Europe really have an option here to kind of step in. If Europe is funding content at this enormous rate, as we're seeing through the funding cycles that happen through Creative Europe, it's only really natural that they all start to stipulate to major streaming platforms that the success of that content is revealed. As I learned from sitting with guys at Muso, it was very interesting to see how people were consuming content, particularly independent films. And what we found was that there were very healthy audiences for these independent films, but they just were not choosing to pay to see it at a cinema. All of this information drove a lot of anxiety within the audience. It was primarily made up of distributors who were listening to basically how many times their film had been copied before they'd actually secured the rights properly and were thinking about showing it in their country. And therefore, for the health of the independent industry, it's very, very important that we start to get those numbers through. And I think the European Union could be a major driver behind this. If you're funding the content, we should find out who's watching it, and when, and for how long, and who they are, and what drives their interests, and what other things do they go and see. That's all for this week. Please like, comment, and subscribe below. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.